Welcome to Business in Heels podcast, the podcast that inspires and educates women in business globally to succeed. Now over to your host, Annemarie Cross.
And welcome to another episode of Business in Heels podcast. Now, I have two very special people joining me today. They are from Business in Heels. We have Lisa Sweeney and Kistin Gunnis. And today they're going to be talking about mentorship, what a mentor is, how a mentor can support you. So if you've got a goal in 2022 that you want to achieve, you have not been able to achieve it, maybe it's something, an intention you've been setting over the last number of years. 2022, this is my year. Say, well, maybe getting a mentor alongside is exactly what you need. They'll also be sharing how Business in Heels can support you with some of the mentorship programs that they have on offer and all of those wonderful things. So welcome to the show, ladies.
Hey, Annemarie.
Hey, thanks, Annemarie.
Look, let's talk about mentorship or mentor. What does it mean? Let's get on the same page. Maybe, Lisa, you'd like to give your definition, and then Kistin, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, sure. I think mentoring is very much about people with experience sharing their particular experiences with others, which allows people to learn and not do the trial and error. So it's very much about experience sharing from my perspective.
And Kistin, would you, well, obviously you agree, you're nodding. Is there anything that
I agree. I also think it's an opportunity to hear a different, perspective. Quite often we're so caught up in what we're doing and we may not have the experiences. Somebody else can perhaps put a different question and we can perhaps walk through with that person to consider, well, what would that actually mean for me or for that particular scenario? And it's in a safe environment, which is always helpful.
Yes. There's something that I often hear, and I would love your feedback on this, is, we talk about coaches and mentorship. What would you think is the difference between the two? And then this is really the question and where I would want to lead to. Often people would think, well, I don't really need a mentor. How can a mentor really support me? And it's because of their misunderstanding, or they don't really see the benefit of having a mentor alongside can be what they need to really, drive them forward or shift them through a breakthrough, whatever that may be. So firstly, what would you say is the difference between, say, a coach and a mentor? Is there a difference? Love to hear maybe Lisa first, and then you, Kistin, you can add to that conversation.
Sure. So mentors are very much around people that share experience, they ask questions, they introduce you to other people. Coaches really grow people, and this is part of mentoring, but grow people through asking questions and forcing them to look at different angles. But quite often, the information that comes out of coaching is only as good as your own knowledge, the person that's being coached. It doesn't actually stretch them much further, whereas a mentor will introduce you to new people. They'll take you out of your comfort zone. They'll provide some wisdom and different perspectives and introduce you to others. And I guess that's part of, really sharing that knowledge and experience and moving you forward.
And Kistin, would you add to that, or?
Yeah, I think sometimes, coaches don't necessarily have that life experience, but they're very good at asking those questions. I think that also sets mentors apart from coaches, is that having perhaps been through those experiences, so, they can actually say, hey, this is how it happened when I went through this, which gives a very realistic perspective.
Yes, yes. And it sounds that when you're looking for a mentor and considering getting a mentor, hiring a mentor, there may be a specific area that you're stuck with, and yet that mentor has experience. Maybe that's an aspect of their expertise. So there may not be necessarily a 6-month or a 12-month or any, specific period of time. There could be, if it's a mentorship program type of a thing. But it sounds as if, if you need expertise in a certain area, a mentor can support you because they're giving you their expertise and their knowledge about that specific area. Would you say that's right, Lisa?
To a certain extent, I guess. So best practice globally is that a good mentoring relationship lasts 9 to 12 months, and people go into it with a specific goal and they work through that goal with the mentor. Now, it's not to say they don't stay in touch with the mentor, but quite often to keep people moving and growing, it's good to introduce other mentors because, of course, part of it's broadening your network as well as giving you different skills and experience. And most mentors aren't just limited, particularly if they're senior women or, they've been very successful business owners, just limited to one particular facet. So I guess but quite often if you have a particular need, then you'll work with somebody. But the key criteria, I think, that's really important is that you have common values and you can build a relationship of respect. If you don't have that, you really don't have anything. And I touch on this because we've just released a short 2-minute video on what to look for in the ideal mentor. And the very first thing we got up front is values, right? So
yes, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into that. That was going to be one of my questions. And by the way, for those of you who are joining us live and you're watching, if you've got a question that maybe you would like to ask of either Lisa or Kistin, just write it in the comments and then I'll share that with them. Or if you've got a comment, maybe you've had a mentor previously and that really has supported you in accelerating your knowledge and ultimately results as well, because that's what a mentor can certainly do. So maybe we'll go to you, Kistin. We'll have a look at then when someone either recognises that they need a mentor, what are some things that often you see happening in someone's career, maybe business? What are some indications that, hang on a minute, I think a mentor is something that I need in my career, in my business? What are some of those points, those aspects?
And that's a good question. I think, from what I have seen through my own experiences, and I've had a number of mentors throughout my experience of my own career, but also with the women that I work with, is it could be that they've gotten feedback. And it may have been constructive feedback and they're not sure what to do with it or how to manage that feedback or what's next. It could be that they just have a goal, but they don't know what the plan is and how to actually implement a plan. It could be that they've been blocked from moving forward in a role, or perhaps they've gone for a role, or maybe they've got a particular career strategy and they seem to be butting up against a brick wall and they can't move forward and they're not quite sure what's going wrong. So I think, all of those facets, perhaps they've lost confidence. They've lost confidence not only in themselves, but in their skill sets. These are, all of those elements is where I regularly see people, how do I need a mentor? Maybe that's where I have the conversation, what should it look like? And that's usually sort of where I start the conversation with a lot of the people that come to us.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a question here, Lisa, and I would love for you to share some insights on that because, and this was going to be my question, there are obviously different relationships that you would go into around finding a mentor, hiring that mentor, or, signing that mentor on. I know Business and Heels has certainly got a mentorship program and you're going to share a little bit more. But to answer Adam's question, is there a strategy to find willing mentors without coming across as selfish? How does the mentee provide value to the mentor?
Look, a lot of mentoring relationships can be casual, and so that's friend to friend, and I guess in those situations you need to be very mindful of the mentor's time and commitment. What we've seen happen over the last 10 years is a major shift in the marketplace around people trying to leapfrog careers, and they're actually using paid mentors, and part of the benefit of that is they access their network and they get to access their time at a time that suits them. So I guess the difference between the casual, friendly relationship where you've got to be very mindful all the way through to the opposite end of the scale where really, the mentee is the client, but at the end of it, it's about giving them what they really need. So sometimes if the person's not really a trained mentor, you're only as good as their knowledge and the sort of mentoring that they've had. And so what we've seen as far as skilling up mentors is there's a huge opportunity to get mentors really, truly skilled up. And what Kistin mentioned earlier about giving people different perspectives, teaching them about problem solving in 360 degrees and taking people on a journey to really look at maybe their business from a different perspective, to explore different opportunities. It's what often sparks the step change. And so having great mentors is a key part of what can really help people. So I guess back to Adam's question, there are mentors and mentors, and you need to have a good conversation with them. And generally, if you have a particular goal and you want to go talk to someone senior, you really need to have a clear goal in mind before they're willing to mentor you, because a lot of them get asked from lots of people, almost like a status symbol. So make sure you're really clear what you want.
Yeah, love that response. Hope that was helpful for you, Adam. Now, something that you mentioned earlier, Lisa, and while you're still here, I'd love to have you share a little bit more around that. We're talking about finding the right mentor, and I think you said unless you have similar core values, it's going to be very difficult to have that relationship. Share a little bit more about that.
Yes, it's interesting because there's as I'm sure you're aware, there's lots of different platforms around at the moment where people have been matched up with people, or they've been through programs and been matched up. And often it comes back to what their goal is and what skill gaps are. And what we've learned over time, and there's a huge amount of evidence to support this, that unless you get core values that are common, people won't accept the advice, no matter how it's couched, because they don't trust the person. And so part of the program that we're working on, and we have a platform that we work on with people, which is really scalable. And this has actually been used overseas. So thousands of people are using it. The values, the core values, getting that right first is absolutely critical. And so we survey people often before we suggest that they get matched. And it might be into a particular industry, but getting really clear on what those core values are and how motivated that person is to learn is a really big part of it.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Kistin, I would love to ask you, because I know that you have recently been certified in mentorship program, which is why now you're speaking about it. You've experienced learning. What were some of the things you learned about mentorship, about becoming a mentor, that perhaps previously you didn't realize, or there may have been a bit of a difference you would have thought, and that is what a lot of people think as well, so that you would love to share that learning that you had, having gone through that mentorship and now being certified in that?
I think it's about being a bit cognizant about what the advice is that we're giving. So yes, you're giving of your experiences, but you do need to recognize that potentially you are giving advice. So there's some legal issues around that, and you need to be aware of that. I think there's also a mental health, issue. And it's also, it's being aware of, where do I stop? Where does my education limit stop? And then perhaps, do I refer to somebody else? Do I refer to a more appropriate, sort of person that might be able to help? I think all of those things need to be considered. And I think there's also elements of saying, all right, well, perhaps I've reached the limit now. And it's about being professional about that, not sort of hanging on to trying to manage that relationship when perhaps it could actually be making it worse. And being very upfront and saying, okay, maybe I'm not the right person for you. Maybe we need to go back and have a look. Perhaps there's somebody better within the network who can provide the right guidance and advice. And sometimes within programs, that option's not always available. But when you're doing a more, an approach like what we do, we're very cognizant about that. It's about getting it right. Yes, as Lisa said about the values, but it's also about being flexible throughout the approach of saying, does this still continue to meet the needs of the individual who is requiring a mentor from that point of view?
And what's wonderful about the Business in Heels network, the community, the number of people that are part of that, if there is something that, as you said, Kistin, if there's an area that you suddenly realise your mentee needs more support in that particular area, and that may not be an area of specialty that you have as a mentor, you can tap into your network, recommend, introduce each other, allow that mentee to get the right support, and then through getting the right support, they're able then to come back and continue the work that you were doing originally. So it sounds like as a mentor, it's also very important to also have connections with other professionals that you can then refer your clients to, or your mentees, so that they get a holistic support as they're working through. Is that right?
Yeah. Let me give you an example, Annemarie. We have a number of business owners that are trying to scale their businesses, and some of them actually need a lot of help around the business plan and getting the basis of the business right. But some of them also need key networking support to get the business name out. So in that case, we've actually allocated them 2 mentors, the one to work through all the business planning stuff and someone who's super well connected to get them into the industry and connected with all the right people. So that person might just do one session with them, but the rest of them are going through with another person. So, I mean, it's cool because we've got access to over 80 mentors. And so being able to sort of cherry pick like the core skills out for people has been really helpful.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, let's talk a little bit about, I'm one. I don't know if anyone's watching or listening that may not realise through what Kistin and what Lisa have shared of the benefits of the mentor. But let's talk about some of the offerings then that Business in Heels have. You've already hinted to it, but let's share a little bit more. Lisa, perhaps you go first and then Kistin, you can add because I know that you're one of the mentors in that group.
So we do a number of different things, but Mentor Mornings is where we start, really. And we have a mission to try and give women access, 1 million women access to mentoring. So at the moment, more than 50% of women get no access. And we know that mentoring increases the amount of promotion and pay rises by 5 times, those that aren't mentored. And for business owners, they tend to be successful all the way through to 7 years versus the horrible statistic that 2 out of 3 fail in the first 3 years. So we know that it makes sense because you save the trial and error. You've got someone who's done it before saying, hey, that doesn't work, or, you need to put these things in place if you're going to do that. So it absolutely makes sense. So Mentor Mornings is where we start. And that's just a 1-hour session. We do it in 4 locations and online. And people can come along and sit with a mentor and just chat and discuss a particular challenge that they're having and see whether mentoring is of any benefit to them. It costs $20 to come, and really it's just about giving people exposure. So that, and we scale that all the way through to UAE, where lots of women get women are really struggling to be both entrepreneurs and professionals because of some of the cultural issues there. And then we do other things like group mentoring, and Kistin will probably can elaborate on that. Individual mentoring, where we do contracts for people, both professionals and business owners, and we've helped a number of different ones scale, get promotions, pay rises. And then we do company activities where we go into a whole company and we actually try and work to create the senior leadership team and upskill them to be mentors with our Mentor Masterclass. That's the certification program. And then they've all got a nice level playing field to go out and mentor others, because otherwise in a lot of organisations it becomes just potluck as to whether you get someone good, bad or indifferent.
Yeah. So it sounds also too, Lisa, a question that I had as you're talking about these mentorship programs and how people can connect. It's also online or face-to-face, or can people, if they're located across Australia and maybe even the world, you talked about UAE, talk a little bit how that's facilitated.
Yeah, so we do Mentor Mornings online, and that's usually sort of afternoon Australian time. And at the moment, COVID willing, we have 3 on location: Geelong, Sydney, and Melbourne. And they're all early in the morning, about 7:15 to 8:30. But you can come along, grab a coffee, meet some other people, and then sit down, have a chat with the mentor for an hour, and then everyone shuffles off to work. So it's a low key but fun experience.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Kistin, Lisa hinted that an area that you're really passionate about is kind of that group mentorship. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so group membership's a peer environment where, you have learned experiences across a number of different people. So I facilitate a number of those sessions. And sometimes it's about having others keep you accountable. So I'm very big on making sure that we set goals at particular points throughout. So if it's a whole 12 months program, we set goals up front, we set 6 monthly goals. It's about keeping people accountable to, hey, this is what I've said I wanted to do. And so we don't just have sort of long-term goals. We've got, session to session goals. But it's also about having a group of people who have got such diverse experiences, and everybody gets a say. And so quite often you build quite a nice group, and they're all so supportive of each other. And they're very celebratory when somebody comes in with a great news story, or perhaps, somebody's had a bad week, and they'll come in, tell us a little bit about it. And we can sort of pick something apart as a group and then perhaps give advice and guidance, or, quite often I find that collaborations happen, because of that. Somebody else might have another set of experiences, so they can go off, meet separately, come back and say, hey, this is what we've actually done. With the individual sessions, sometimes it's about being a cheerleader. It's about saying, no matter what happens, I'm here to support you. I'm here to give you that trusted support that you're looking for. You can have a confidential conversation. It's not going to go further than me unless you give me that approval. And I've seen women, they're getting promoted because we're able to give them that strategy, and they know, hey, I've got somebody to come back and just test something with you. I've seen pay rises because we actually sit down and review performance reviews before they go into a performance review. So they've got the right information, they've got the right mindset. It's about building that internal confidence that no matter what happens, you've got somebody who will back you and will give you that sort of support that you're looking for, that is independent, that's not part of perhaps an organisation, because it can be quite difficult. I come from a corporate background, so I know what it's like.
Yes.
So, that's the sort of thing that I perhaps bring to the conversations I have.
Yeah, I love that. Lisa, I know that you and I have done a number of podcasts on this particular podcast, and you've been, sort of CEO, co-founder of Business in Heels for many years, which means that you've networked and spoken to many women from different nationalities, different ages, different industries. I'd love you to share, and I'm asking this question because so often women, and men can do this too, but I think women, we just own this so well. We look at what we do and we think, oh, no one is struggling with what I am. I'm too embarrassed. I'm too ashamed that I would even admit that I'm having trouble with this. But once they get inside a safe environment and they start to open up a little bit, you realize that others are struggling with exactly the same thing that you are, have worked through that, so now can support you, and that we're not often the only ones just struggling with that. I'd love you to share some insights on this, please.
Yeah, I think Kistin touched on it earlier. Confidence is probably one of the biggest issues that women in general have. We want to tick every box. We want to have covered everything thoroughly before we move on to the next step. And so giving people permission just to go for it is a big part of this. And a lot of women have those self-doubts, and many of them just will not put themselves first. I talk to women all the time who just, it's the family, it's whatever. And one of our new mentees actually said to me, she said, after 15 years, I've finally given myself permission to try and grow my career. And so we were talking about it, and she said, I just don't know where to start. Right? It's such a big, do I stay in this company? I've been here for ages. Do I go to another company? What do I do? What are my choices? And, she's so overwhelmed by choice now that she's finally made this decision. And other ones, struggling to put themselves and invest in themselves to get where they want to go. They know they really want to be successful. In fact, they're so busy working themselves sick. And a lot of them say to me, I really want to get into senior leadership, but I just can't find the time to do these things. You've got to give yourself time to network. Everybody else is. You've got to build your presence. You've got to take those time and steps to do that. Yeah. So that's a big part of what we keep chatting about. And culturally, it's really interesting too, Annemarie, now that we're, working with quite a number of different countries. So we're close to kicking a branch off in Georgia, just south of Russia. And just, listening to all the different cultural issues where women are still putting themselves way second is really interesting.
Yeah, something that I can't remember who I heard this from, but if either of you can share a little bit more, it's when a woman is supported, and even if they start a business, an entrepreneurial venture within her community, because they're very giving, it's not just themselves as the business owner that benefits from that. It trickles down to the community because of the nature of women often wanting to support and collaborate with others. Have you seen this happen too?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some really amazing stats around. I think it's about 80% of money that goes into a company gets reinvested into the community, which is really interesting because they'll outsource to all the people in their community to help them as they continue to grow, which is great.
Yeah, I know
The
it
World
is.
Bank has a quite a large amount of research with regards to that. They have very specific programs around lending funds to small business women because one, they know it gets paid back, and two, it makes significant differences for education, community health, and the community as a whole.
Yes.
So there is, I think there's been well over 25 years worth of experience at the World Bank level.
Yeah, it's amazing. And of course, within that environment and within the network of Business and Heals, it is international. And there's nothing better than to connect with, a like-minded group of individuals, but collaboratively, united, that doors can open that could take you years, couldn't it, to get in front of, because you've built that know, like, and trust within the community. And you might share in one of those mentoring, maybe that a roundtable session in a group session. Because I'm really looking for this and that. Someone helps you to put the pitch together, and someone says, "I've got a great connection for you." Now, that could take you years. Do you have any examples of that at all? If not, that's fine. But there is such value around mentorship that even outweighs, I think, the expectations that often we enter and we get into a mentorship program.
Well, probably to add to that, there's probably one other little thing that we do, which is called Big Deals in Heels, and it's about promoting women-owned and led businesses into corporates. And so one of the challenges, I think, in the global supply chain is that only 2% of the contracts go to women-owned and women-led businesses, which is pretty sad when you consider we're about 50% of the population, right? And so a lot of corporates are willing to do more business with women-owned businesses if they're certified. And so we've been leading a program called Big Deals in Heels, which teaches people, once they are certified, how to pitch to the corporates. And we do a day, and we'll be doing this in April. It's a day where you can pitch to 5 to 10 corporates. So you learn, and then you get to pitch. And so something that would normally take you maybe months to get, just one of those appointments, you get the opportunity to go through and actually pitch to some of the biggest corporates. So anything from Microsoft, Dell, Lions Drinks, Westpac, Google, Amazon, you name it. Most of the big corporates are on board. So it's really interesting because, again, it's that whole ability to upskill and find those connections, right?
Yeah. And what an opportunity to be able to clarify and get your pitch just right before you have the opportunity to share that. I think that's gold, isn't it? Because you want to have a little bit of, and that feedback, that honest, feedback can often be really what we need in that process. Share a little bit more. Who would like to share a bit more about people who are listening and watching today, or maybe even the recording later? What is the best way to connect to find out more about these wonderful mentorship opportunities?
Well, probably if you check out our website, I think, Annemarie. So we've got most of them up on the website. We've got some really cool little videos where people can actually go through and learn a little bit about what's a great mentor look like. There's another one we're going to put up next week, which is like what can a mentee get out from a mentoring program? So what does good look like? And we've got more things going up all the time. If there are any people interested that want to actually upskill themselves as a mentor, that are keen to, become some of these people that offer these services, the Mentor Masterclass is there online, and it's a certification program. So people need to go through it, but it's a really good program, and it does mean that then people are recognised for the credentials that they have.
And of course, Kistin, we mentioned earlier that you've gone through that, and I'm sure that there'd been some incredible knowledge growth that you've been able to incorporate within your own business and life as well. So you win by benefiting through that, and of course, you're able to pay that forward through the mentees that you work with.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing I learnt was, and I probably knew it already, but it didn't reinforce it, is, looking back over my career by, providing experiences and just talking to others and saying, okay, you've had this situation, this scenario, how do we deal with it? Suddenly you recognize how much experience you have yourself, which I probably was a little I'd known I had done a lot throughout my corporate career, but the fact that I could potentially answer the majority of the questions that are put to me, or come up with a way to assist a person with most of the scenarios that are in front of us. And if not, maybe we research it together and we work through it together. So I actually learn just as much as the other person does. I think that's the biggest thing that I've gotten, by being a certified mentor. It's that I'm constantly learning, but it's also a reinforcement of, wow, I've got a lot of skills behind me, and it reinforces the confidence in your own skills, in your own self, to then give to others.
Yeah. How often do we hear women say, well, I've only done X, Y, and Z? And you're thinking, like, oh my goodness, in some of the events that Business and Healed holds, the leaders and CEOs that we speak to, so humble, but their experience is incredible. And we're all kind of mesmerized. Oh, well, I've just only done this and this. But it's a reflection when we're reflected back and other women are in that group and go, you know what, I just want to acknowledge you for that, recognize that what you've done and the challenges that you've overcome have given you the skills and knowledge to be able to pay that forward and share that lesson and that learning with others. And that's huge, isn't it? That imposter syndrome, and who am I to speak about that? Who are you not to?
I've given myself permission to succeed.
Exactly. Which sounds wonderful. And of course, Lisa, the web address, I know that you said go to our website, but for people who may not have had the web address, what is that URL?
Sure, it's www.businessandheals.com. When people get there, there's two different experiences. They can either go through it as a business owner or from an employee perspective. And there's one other thing that, as Kistin was talking, it occurred to me. One of the really interesting things we see about mentoring is people come in with a particular goal, and when they really explore that with a mentor, they often change direction because they don't know what they don't know.
Yes.
And it's just a really interesting outcome that we see a lot. It's just one of those things that, when you're trying to grow your career or business, you just don't know what you don't know.
No, and you don't know if you don't recognise, like someone may come into you, Kistin, and say, I really want to go for this particular role, and you hear them share what they've been able to do, and you say to them, actually, I think you need to go for that role, because we don't recognise that. We don't see what we don't see.
And that's a really good point that you touch on. Nearly every person at the beginning of the conversations that I have, and Lisa touched on it, it's about giving yourself permission. Quite often I have to have a blunt conversation about, why are we going for this job when you already tick off almost 100% of the skill sets? How long are you actually going to stay in that role, and is it going to be challenging? Because really there's a return of investment requirement. If somebody is placed into that role, they want you there for at least 12 to 18 months minimum. If you can fly through it and you can absolutely do the job, why aren't you reaching for the role above? And also, consider what you already know. If you are really good at a set of skills, why aren't you using those and giving yourself permission to use them to get yourself ahead? Because quite often that's another conversation I have with people, is that they're really good at relationship management. They're really good at, whatever it is that they're doing, but yet they don't allow themselves to use those skills to actually help their own career, which is, I find, I have to have a lot of conversations to try and reposition that.
And it's wonderful when you have someone that recognizes that, reflects that back to you, and then gives you, and I love the way that you said, Kistin, earlier, that you're also a cheerleader, you know, a cheerleader who just cheers alongside and then also encourages you. You know, go and do that, you know, and there's nothing better, I think, nothing more powerful than when you set an intention with your mentor and accountability partner. There's no way you're going to go back to a meeting and say, no, I haven't done that.
No.
Or a couple of times, because that mentor's going, let's have a look at what's driving. Why have you not put your name forward for that project? And it's wonderful. And that's really where we start to see, as you said, through partnering with a mentor and becoming a mentor, or being a mentor for someone else, which is just as much enjoyment, isn't it, when you see your mentee just shine and achieve goals and come back to meetings and say, I got that job, or I won that business. You know, you celebrate alongside them as well.
Yeah. And absolutely, I quite often do a little happy dance after I get off a session with somebody who's given me great news. I'm like, ooh, this is fantastic.
Exactly, because that now means they can go and impact that community, that business, that, you know, the group of wherever they are now placed, and everyone wins. So again, the website is businessinheels.com. When you're at the website, you've got two different experiences. So whether you are an employee or you are a business owner, click on either of those, and then you'll be prompted to find out more. Fantastic, ladies. It's always so wonderful to have a chat. I think 2022, you know, double numbers, let's double the goals. And that's something else that a mentor will often do. We say a goal and you go, I don't think, let's put a 0 on the end of that one, shall we? Or let's put a senior on front of that job title. That's what we'll go for. And let that be what 2022 brings for each and every one of you, and, of course, people who are listening and watching as well. Thank you once again, ladies, for sharing your insights and encouragement today.
Thanks.